I've set up here with one video track and a couple of audio tracks. We'll look at a couple more track list functions here related to audio at first, but additionally, as the tutorial progresses, I'll show you how the functions often cross over into the video tracks too. We'll look at some of the controls available on each track. Have you noticed some of the controls you see expand and contract? So have a play around with that. Whilst I'm doing this, keep your eye on the physical size of the controls. In particular, the pan and the volume sliders adjust size and position as they respond to track size adjustments. If I grab the right edge here of our track list, the area enlarges and the controls adapt to fit the new track list footprint. Now I want to look at using functions that ostensibly appear to control audio only, but in fact control video too. So let's start by looking at the mute and solo options. If you are coming from an audio background, you might assume mute applies to audio only and not to video. Now this, in the audio recording world, mute does tend to be specific to disengaging the volume of an audio file. However, it applies to both video and audio tracks here, so clicking the mute button stops playback from being heard or seen dependent on the type of track that you are looking at. Let's turn our attention to video now. So if I mute this video track, then you'll see the screen goes blank as this is the only video at that position. I'll unmute. You're not isolated to only muting or soloing individual tracks. You can mute as many tracks as required. It's quite possible, I suppose, to mute all the tracks except for one. So imagine we had 30 different tracks. Well, you could mute them all except for one, but really in this situation it would be best to solo one track with this button. So rather than muting every track and leaving one track unmuted, this using the solo button achieves the same thing. Now here's something to be aware of. Notice that muting solos that type of track only. If you solo a video track, the audio track remains live despite another track being soloed. Incidentally, if you solo a video track, the audio tracks don't get muted. If you solo an audio track, the videos don't get muted. So let's look at muting tracks and how this visually displays on the timeline. Take a look at what happens when I mute a track. Along its horizontal length there, that particular track becomes greyed out, and when I solo, similar tracks become greyed out also. So keep that in mind. Soloing or muting pertains to its own type. Anyway, I want to look at this level slider. At present it's set to be 100%. So if I now place the cursor over here, we see this track in the main view. Now by dragging to the left down to 25%, keep your eye on the main view. As you can see, this affects the track visibility and I suppose is the visual equivalent of reducing volume on an audio track. Right, I'll take it back up to 100%. We'll turn our attention to automating functions now, and in particular, we'll look at two functions, automating pan positions and automating volume. Therefore, I've got this audio track, so here's what we do. I'll select the audio track and then I'll go up to the insert menu and I'll choose audio envelope. We've got the choice to click on volume. We'll come back to that. If you look at our track, you'll notice a horizontal line running across its length, and this is known as a control envelope. It's a straight line at the moment, but we'll adjust this in a second. And so now, of course, we see the pan envelope stretched across the timeline. It's conveniently placed at the center because our starting pan position is at the center of the stereo field. Just to remind you, here in the track list, we have these two sliders. We've got volume and we've got pan. I'll focus on pan to start us off. To start us off, we need to activate the automation button. It's this button. With it engaged, it means any changes we make, then Vegas will record, for want of a better word, will record those changes so that they play back like that always. So I'll ensure it's engaged and then drag the pan slider to the left to, well, it reaches 40% left. Meaning, of course, the playback will have now moved from the center of the stereo field to the left. We can visually see this if we follow the pan path from the center to 40% left, registering on the timeline as being towards the top of the event. When we move to the right of our stereo field, the pan envelope will be down towards the bottom. I'll move the cursor again, and this time I'll drag the slider to 50%. And we now see visually the pan sweep from the center up, but audibly it'll be 40% left. Then the path moves down to the bottom of the event. When we listen back to this in a moment, it'll be further to the right. Before we listen to this, let's automate the volume. We can have multiple envelopes open and running on our events and tracks simultaneously. And again, go up to the insert menu, go across to audio envelopes, and then this time click on volume. Notice, because we've already clicked on the pan envelope, we can see that clicking on the volume envelope doesn't make the pan envelope disappear. We can see both within the same event. I'll move my cursor and going to the volume slider, I'll drag it down to between -4 and -5 dB. I'll move the cursor to the right and I'll move the slider now to 0. So when we listen to this back, we'll hear the volume start at 0 dB, dip in volume and then crawl back up gradually to 0 dB again. Whilst the volume is adjusting like that, the pan additionally will be working too. Let's have a listen to this so we can hear how the pan and the volume have been simultaneously automated. Let's play it now.
White Star rocket ships fill the air with the roar of drums and the sound of I don't care. I can just imagine what's going on there, but I cannot fathom as we dance along the air.
So that's all we need to do when we want to automate pan position and volume position with our audio file. Right, we'll finish up here then, and I'll see you in a moment.